I want to thank the good people of ITF for having me. Always great partnership between UITP, as Anne has said, and ITF. Yeah. Is it appearing? Wonderful. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So very good afternoon. I'll just move to the next slide. In how we approach the pandemic, we saw it opportunistically. So, in the words of Winston Churchill, never waste a good crisis. And indeed, that was how we approached it. In Chinese, you have the character of Weizi, which is an opportunity within a crisis. And then we felt that given our history with SARS and all that, when the pandemic hit, it was opportune for us to take advantage of what we couldn't do under normal circumstances, or what we found difficult to do. So next slide would tell you that the same thing, an opportunity to reimagine our land transport. We've been seeing the trends not unique to Singapore. We call it the lockdown or circuit breaker here in early April 2020. Work from home became a strong feature, as with other cities. Travel preferences shifted from radially into the city to more local travel. Activities also shifted in terms of active modes. And then also weekend travel dominated more than weekday travel. So the change in the travel patterns and observed trends then gave us ideas as how to accelerate and advance some of our strategies. Next slide. And this would enable us to seize opportunities. And what were the opportunities? Basically, it was to provide an efficient, reliable, and inclusive multimodal transport network. And this will give commuters expansive options and alternative use of modes and routes. And then it's also looking at the shifts and seeing whether they were permanent in nature, and then try to actively shape it rather than let the shifts shape us, to actively shape them towards and align them towards what we call as a strategy of walk, cycle, and riding public transport. And lastly, to build a resilient public transport that is future-proofed across various dimensions. We were able to do that because from day one, we never shut down the public transport system during the pandemic. We ran it flat out. And we made sure that the messaging that went out was that public transport was safe, both physically and psychologically. Of course, we had to put in measures like any other city to elevate the levels of hygiene and to ensure that people felt safe. But just so you know, we kept the same messaging throughout, and that enabled us to build upon a good foundation. The land transport master plan, the next slide, is really sharing with you what is the long-term vision for our land transport system. Really 3 key planks, coming up with a 20-minute town and a 45-minute city. Transport for all is our strategy to be inclusive. And last but not least, healthy lives and safer journeys really talks about air quality, environment, and how we can make people's travel and experience a lot cleaner and safer. And so we found that the pandemic gave us a lot of room and white space to be able to shape the travel and align it with our long-term strategies, which to this day, we have not shifted in terms of the long-term strategy. We found that these are still highly relevant in the context of highly urbanized Singapore. First up is talking about normalizing new travel patterns, and that's in the next slide. So we, as a government, next slide, as a government, we mandated for all, work from home. At least for essential businesses, except for essential businesses that could not, all that could work from home could do that. And we were anxious to make sure that we entrench telecommuting at least a certain percentage and staggered flexible hours and not let it regress, to make sure that we flatten the peak quite permanently, and to help that would help us optimize the travel network. Work from home arrangements or flexible work arrangements, FWA, continue to be encouraged as part of the permanent feature today. And the government, as part of the public sector, influencing the civil service, influencing the private sector, trying to ease as we ease our COVID restrictions into the endemic phase, continue to be FWAs continue to be a very significant part of the work arrangements. And just to tell you about the recovery in the next slide, our public transport ridership has more or less recovered. Next slide. We are about 79% of pre-COVID, both for the AM peak and the whole day travel. So we are 20% away. We are not so anxious as to ensure that we recover 100% as to where it is recovered. You can recover 100%, but it is the same type of peak situation that we have, or super peak as we call it within the peak, then we are sweating the assets, and that's not a good thing. And that was something that we were working on anyway. So shaping the demand is something which is very important, and COVID gave us the impetus to shape it even further. And so you can see the different milestones. I won't take too much time to explain. They're all underneath. You can find that we're where we are yet. So we expect that we won't recover completely. We may be up in the 80s, high 80s, but a significant percentage will be working from home, and that's not a bad thing for the transport system. Next. So this tells you that even though we see the peak flattening, you know, the off peak, which is in the center, has has flattened less, which means that we wanted to see that people continue to travel in between the peaks in the day. And this is something that we're working on. We try and coordinate across agencies and government sectors and agencies, including the private sector, to try and nudge that kind of behavior to ensure that we don't crowd out the public transport system and sweat it unnecessarily. Yeah. So this is just a graph to let you know what we're doing, what we're working towards. Next slide tells us about accelerating our land transport 2040. WCR is really work cycle ride efforts. And so what we've done is to actively shape the modes for easy and safe intra-town travel. And so we've been converting a lot of road lanes to transit priority corridors. And these are not your pop-up lanes that many cities saw that now have regressed back to the original use. We were really permanently repurposing some of these efforts and making sure that road space is being given gradually back to transit and also active travel, and this is part of also accelerating our cycling plan, which is this ambitious plan of tripling it from today's 500 kilometers close to 800 by 2023 and by 2030 1,003. And so implementing pedestrianized footpaths and making sure the city is walkable and seamlessly together with other modes and cycle enabled is really part of the plan. Next, I'll share about also connecting commuters from homes. And we have a very strong planning process in Singapore that looks out 40 years in our concept plan situation together with the land use agencies, and we are quite tightly coupled as in the planning circles, and that enables us to plan long term and to safeguard land for transport purposes. And so this enables us to build a comprehensive network around residential towns to enable that end-of-trip facilities are encouraged, parking facilities, ramp facilities, all to enable a higher mode share in terms of active travel. You can see some of the details there. Our Walk to Ride program essentially is to facilitate walking. If those of you who've been to Singapore, you know that we are in the tropics. We don't have the seasons. We are mostly humid and hot. And so we have an ambitious plan to roll out 200 kilometers of sheltered linkways, and we're well on our way already to do that. And this is within 400 meters of stations and bus stops and interchanges and transport nodes. You can see pictures of what the planning, what is the outcome of the planning. And this is all to allow seamless and convenient travel, multimodal travel, combined mobility. And we also have grants for developers and building owners to take advantage of end-of-trip facilities, so that helps them to be a part of what we're doing. Next slide, I'll share a little bit about our integrated transport hubs. You see a lot of that in Hong Kong as well, and so we're not very different. But we do long-term planning and ensure that our commercial developments are very well developed together and built together and designed in together with our bus interchanges and our train stations. And we have rolled out several of these integrated transport hubs, and we have already 10 today with 17 in planning and work in progress as we roll them further out. But talking about integrated transport elements, Singapore is we have a history of very strong car ownership and car restraint measures. And so I'd like to share a little bit with you. In the next slide, you can see that we have a hard cap of vehicle growth here. And so in the early 90s, we used to allow our vehicle population to grow at 3%, but we have stepped it down considerably, as you can see. Right down in February 2018, we were down at 0%, except for 0.25% of commercial vehicle growth, and that's almost zero for all other categories of growth. So in order for you to own a car, someone needs to give up a car for you to own it. And because of this policy, it comes in a permit system. You have to auction for a permit to be able to own a vehicle. So the last round of prizes just opened at 4 o'clock yesterday. 100,000 Singapore dollars just to get a permit to own a 1,600cc car. Yeah, so if you are driving Volvo, there's S60 or something, that's the category, and you have to pay 100,000 Singapore dollars, which is about 67,000 euros before you can own a car. That doesn't involve the cost of the car yet. And so that's how we've kept aggressively our car vehicle growth, just to share with you. And also the next slide tells you that willingly or unwillingly, households have owned less cars over the years due to our very aggressive policies and very pervasive public transport network, both the push and pull working together to deliver an outcome. And then last but not least, in terms of not just car ownership, but car use, in the next slide, we actively disincentivize car use. So owning a car at an expensive capital cost is one thing, but when you own it, we don't want you to have the sunk cost effect and use it in a buffet syndrome. We make sure that you use it with great utility and not meaninglessly. Okay, so we have road pricing is in gantry form. That's marred our landscape a little bit, some would argue. But moving to the next generation one, it will be less marring. It will be island-wide, and it will be based on satellite, and you won't see much of the infrastructure, but you'll still be charged. You can be sure of that, and you'll be discouraged from using your private vehicle too much. All right. I switch back to the one of the other strategies we're doing in terms of accelerating electrification. So these are some of our targets. We're pushing very hard for electrification of our public bus fleet, making sure that cleaner energy prevails, and also fitting out our depots, our garages with the requisite electrical charging. And so we have a 6,000 bus fleet, and we will get there by 2030. Half of it already would be electric. And the next thing I want to talk about is also in terms of the energy transition and consumption and discipline. We've also procured systems. These are all our driverless trains, and looking at the energy consumption, both in terms of the chillers, the ground coolings, district coolings, the lighting and all that. We're moving lower and lower in terms of overall energy use, so that the public transport footprint continues to be smaller. The environmental and resilience, the next one, unfortunately, we don't have wind in Singapore, and we don't have nuclear. So we rely on the mighty sun here in Singapore. Yeah, so we put out solar panels aggressively, and good enough to power up 285 single-deck e-buses for an entire year through all our public transport and road infrastructure. That's quite aggressive, and something that we will push on to do. And I'll talk a little bit also about land use resilience, which is important. As much as we plan mobility, we need to plan it to ensure that we reduce mobility needs and bring jobs closer to home. So rather than have a very central business district where travel is very radial, we need to optimize the network by ensuring that, and since travel is very local anyway, coming out of the pandemic, we ensure that regional centers are up, backroom officers move out there, and so we can bring jobs closer to people, and that negates a lot of necessary travel. And polycentricity is a plan that we work very aggressively with our land use agencies. Next, I'll talk about network resilience. This is about expanding our rail network. This is no regret. We pour quite a bit of investment into this. You can see, I won't belabor the point to say that those are our targets on the right, to make sure that households are within close proximity of the train station. Operational resilience, this is what we measure ourselves as, making sure that public transport is just like when you open a tap, you make sure that you get clean water coming out of the tap. And that's how we want to make sure that the mean kilometers before failure, that you travel almost 1 million nkbf before you hit a failure. Yeah, so it's highly super reliable, and that's what we want it to be. And this comes at great cost to the system, and comes about because we pour quite a bit of investment into making sure that we upgrade the critical components such as signaling, new trains, power systems, etc. Talk about a little bit about system resilience, because I know we need to talk about sustainable transport and inclusivity. And this is something that we're working on to make sure that our senior folks get more time in terms of crossing. They just need to tap the crossings and they get more time to cross. Next generation passenger information display systems are state of the art, as well as exploring now with hands-free ticketing. We already have a lot of back-end ticketing. This is in the next phase using RFID, to assist us. And then also the next slide tells you a little bit about assistive technology for those who are visually impaired, so that bus drivers get to talk to them, know where they are. They can signal to bus drivers as well where they are at the bus stops. And so the UITP has thought it was a great idea and credited us with an award. And so this is the end of my presentation. So in summary, I think the importance of having policies to increase multi-mobility is vital. It comes about through building resiliences across the system and throughout the various dimensions I talk about, in order to make sure that structurally we are sound and we don't regress into a post-pandemic situation that we don't like from a transport point of view. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Happy to take questions.